a point at that stage of thinking it was physically impossible for somebody like me to run more than an hour. I was like, I can't run. Like, it's just not in me. I like running, but like it's physically impossible until you kind of do it.
Yeah.
Right. Until you kind of get over, and hills weren't a thing and stuff like that. So it was an amazing few years of a journey for me, right? So I'd love to know as like a bit of your origin story of being an outsider. Have you always been outdoorsy? Have you always kind of been, whether it's running or anything like that? Tell me about that.
Um, I find it quite hard to answer this question because I tend to say no, I haven't always been outdoorsy. But then when I kind of go back and think about it, I have to an extent, but just not in the way that I am now. So as a kid, I was very sporty. I've got two older brothers. And if you weren't doing sport, then you weren't involved. So I was always doing some kind of sport. And for me as a kid, that was more like tennis, played a lot of tennis, and I did kind of gymnastics and trampolining. So not your outdoorsy sports necessarily. But I was fit, I was active. Um, and I occasionally as a child used to run if my mum and dad were going for a run. We've got a nice park next to our old house. So we'd go for a run around the park and I used to feel okay. And then I'd say I had a few down years, probably from being 15 to when I started running at 17, where, like you, I was, found drinking and
Yeah. Yeah.
was at college and going out and about and not really that interested in looking after myself that well. But for me, that time very quickly lost steam. And I did get to the point when I was in college where I thought, this is not good. I need to look after myself. I don't want to fall into this trap of like laziness and, being in bed all weekend and not being outdoors. So I started running and it was really, really hard. I honestly could not run 1 kilometer when I started running. And I used to do this run with my mum from our house down down a big hill to the gym, and it was 4K. And I had to stop multiple times. It used to make me cry. It was so difficult, but something in me must have wanted to do it because I stuck at it. And from starting running at 17, I just trained for a half marathon within like 9 months. And as soon as I kind of got over that first lump of gaining fitness, which is a really tough time, I was just hooked. And I remember when I started running, I used to say, oh, I'll go running, but I'll never love it. I'll never be one of those people who loves it. And definitely within 9 months of running consistently, I absolutely loved it. And from there, it's just always been a part of my life. It's just, I've never really had to think about it. It's just been there. So I've ran from being 17, I'm 30 now. So that's quite a long time to be in a sport and be consistent in a sport. I've ran probably used to train for like a couple of half marathons every year. And then I'd say maybe 5 or 6 years ago was when I moved from road running or running around the houses and just running for fun to finding the trails. And I'm so lucky with where I live. Well, we both are because we've got the peaks on our doorstep. But from my house to the peaks now, it's about 5K, so I can run there, and I'm
Amazing.
in the hills. So I think in my kind of early to mid 20s, I started getting out and about in the peaks a lot more and becoming quite familiar with it, and wild swimming and walking and climbing a little bit, and kind of doing all the sports that are available to me there. And with trail running, it was just the most lovely, adventurous, freeing experience where I just felt like I'd found my thing. I felt so comfortable in that environment. I loved that like childlike fun of scrambling around on rocks and running up hills and getting a bit muddy. And then, like you say, when we started joining that trail running group, we were training for a specific race. That brought in that sense of community, and that only deepened my engagement in the outdoors. So I think I have been outdoorsy from being young, but definitely from my like mid-20s onwards, it's been like the most significant part of my life, I would say.
Nice. Yeah, that's there's loads in there to kind of unpack. I think we think about it like running and trail running as the same sort of thing. Like I'm a big believer in practice as a catalyst to always kind of get better and continually improve. And when I say practice, for the people that don't know, a bit like a yoga practice or a breathwork practice, it's something you do, right? And you continually get better. There's not a finish button. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and for me, it's one of those things that are in my diary first before work stuff. Sorry, work people. Um, but like, schedule my runs first, and like, look, it's something kind of to look forward to like it kind of, without that, if I go through a period of injury or busyness, if I have to travel or go to London or whatever for work, and I miss the trails, that sense of connection with the nature stuff. Because I used to run at schools and stuff at like the mile around the track was
Yeah.
all right because my dad was quite good. My dad was an elite marathon runner for his age. He did a 2:52 marathon at the age of 55, which was
Oh,
ridiculous.
wow.
Like
That's very
ridiculous.
speedy.
Yeah, I did try once upon a time to beat that and failed. So I've
Mm,
given up now and just
yeah,
like to run uphill.
for the best.
Yeah. But I think there's loads of good stuff around like that importance of connection, like, and
Mm,
how trail running specifically helps you generate that connection. So one of the things, the morals of this podcast, the things I want to kind of uncover, right, is to explore the kind of the mind, body, and soul connection of trail running and being outside and nature and stuff like that. Because I think, only from lived experience, right? I want to know if it's true for other people, but it's definitely changed and been the vehicle that's chosen me to get a stronger mind, a stronger body, and a like a stronger soul, right? It's a meditative thing. There's definitely a connection or a confidence that comes from trail running. Weirdly, I don't know if that makes any sense to you, if you felt that sort of thing before.
yeah, I think that makes total sense to me, Tim. I think I really found that when I started running initially. I think even road running, I found, when I say I felt like I was in the right place, like I really did build so much self-esteem from running. And I think as a teenager in my early 20s, I was quite an anxious person. I didn't feel like I had loads of identity, and I was figuring things out, and I was flitting about like college to uni and different jobs that like you do when you're young. But from starting running, I just felt like I had a constant there in my life where I was like, well, that's one thing that I feel like I am. I'm a runner. And I don't mean like I'm a fast runner or I'm an elite runner, I'm a professional runner. I'm just a runner. I have that thing in my life, and I can relate to other people because I'm a runner. But definitely moving on to the trails, there's just something a bit special about being in those kind of environments, like the Peak District or Wales or the Lake District of Scotland. The more wild, kind of rugged environments is where I feel like I belong. And that was an instant thing, I think, from me starting to get out and about into the peaks and into those harsher, I guess, environments. It definitely coincided with my career choices as well, because I've always been interested in mental health. I did psychology as an undergrad, and then I always knew that I wanted to do something within sport and mental health because that was where my interest lies. And like you, with lived experience, running's helped me manage my anxiety so much. Like I say, it's brought me that sense of identity. So I knew that was where I wanted to work. and I took a bit of a funny path to get there, but working as a mental health practitioner, a mental health nurse for the NHS was so stressful. And throughout my work life, running's always been my fallback for managing that. And I feel like I'm practicing what I preach, because I would encourage people who are struggling with their mental health or wanting to improve their well-being or look after themselves to think about being active and think about being outdoors and connecting with nature and connecting with other people and connecting with, you know, their environment and their self. So practicing what I preach has really improved my mind, body, and my soul. You know, all those things kind of fall onto my mind. And I not really do anything to get them there. They just that's the result of being out and about and being outside.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I wonder, like, I want to get into the background of mental health, because it's definitely been I don't know, not a cure. I don't know what the right language is, but like a help for my mental health. So it's always been a connection for me, like trail running and that, because the reason why I got into trail running was a friend of mine called Matt Bagwell. He did a challenge called Run the Country Ultra in, oh my God, when was that? 2021, where he ran an ultra in every county in September. So 21 ultras in September for the campaign against living miserably, because he'd had lived experience of male suicide and suicidal thoughts, and they really helped him and stuff.
Yeah.
And we ended up connecting to an amazing group of people, like who are mainly chaps who have done that, who have been through similar things, right, and through lived experience, and have dealt with similar feelings and similar points of kind of disconnection and loss of identity and all the things that you've said, right? And he was doing these ultras, and obviously he could have ran alongside the dual carriageways, but nobody wants to do that for that amount of time. So they were all trails. I remember one of them, my first ultra I did with him, actually, we ran from Mansfield in Nottinghamshire to Sheffield along a beautiful trail. It was really good. It's only about, I think it was only like 28 miles, but it was a good, it was all uphill from Mansfield to Sheffield, technically, I remember, like the whole way. But like, there's so much to do on there, and it was I don't know if this is a thing that correlates with your work, but there's something about adventure or challenge or doing difficult things physically that makes it easier to do difficult things, or trains us to be better at other challenging things. Like I've found this in myself, like doing difficult physical things for somebody like me, like, but if you don't watch this video, if you're on audio, I'm not a traditional running shaped runner, I would say. So things are like, sometimes it's challenging, but I always say that running has been my best teacher. It teaches me where my limits are, but how to go past them, or because they all live in my kind of expectation, I suppose, or judgment of my own mind. What would you say the benefits of challenge or difficult or adventure is for people's mental health, or have I made that up?
No, you haven't made it up. I think there's definitely a huge parallel between being able to physically overcome challenges and using that experience and that confidence to overcome mental challenges. I think confidence is a huge part of it. And I think, you know, when you're going through a tough time mentally, everything feels really, really difficult. And it can feel quite confusing, and you can feel lonely, and you feel like you're going through that all by yourself. And really, if you think about those things I've picked out there, that's not that different to running an ultra, in my experience. A lot of the time you're running on your own. It feels really hard. You don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of running into the unknown. And so I think that those things like parallel quite well together. And definitely for me, having the experiences of, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to go out there and try running a longer distance, or try running a really, really hilly route. And I get nervous about doing those things because they're hard. But that does give me a lot of resilience, a lot of mental resilience, where, you know, my brain's not always my friend on a run. My mind isn't always in it. Nobody's is. But actually, you can think of different ways and different techniques to overcome the negative thoughts that you might be having when you're running, or your own self-esteem and your own expectations around what you can achieve. And so I think ultra running or trail running in that way does parallel so nicely to overcoming mental health challenges, because you're constantly surprising yourself with what you can achieve. And I think that is the same in mental health. When you find the right ways of coping with your mental health, you are going to surprise yourself with what you can achieve. And it might feel very bleak at the start, but actually, once you get the momentum and once you start being able to kind of manage yourself and get to know yourself a little bit better, you'll be surprised at what you can overcome mentally.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's definite parallels with like running the long stuff. I've done a few ultras. I don't consider myself an ultra runner. I like a 3 to 4 hour run, which in the trails can be like half marathonish upwards,
Yeah.
a little bit. Like I don't have much of a desire anymore to run for 10 hours, if I'm honest. But it might change. You know, there might be a challenge that piques your interest, right? That goes wrong. But like the thing that tied mental health to running for me was that word confidence, right? And I found that weirdly in solitude, like because all my work stuff is dealing with people, like teaching and things like that. There's always people involved. There's always a room of people. Like all my previous to restarting running, like I was a very social guy. My exercise was walking to the pub on a Friday afternoon and then rolling back down the hill later on from there.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like I was not a tall, I'm like 5'11", but I was like 17 and a half stone. And like everything was to do with people. I found everything about me from other people, what other people thought, if I thought it was kind, funny, useful, whatever. Do you know what I mean? But being on your own for you know, for 5 hours, tunkling around on a hill that you've never been to before, relying on your watch, because if your watch stops, buggered, technically in my mind. Like there's such power in that, the different elements of trail running and ultra running, and like solitude has been like learning to be okay with the inner monologue and stuff. That funny inner voice that you get when you're running a long way, or generally in my life, if I'm honest, it's always kind of there. It's super powerful, but that's where like the confidence comes from, not from other people in my eyes, right? And the trail running and ultra running community is wonderful, right? It's like super supportive. I've never met anybody I didn't like the Jungle Book song says in the trail running community. But yeah, I think it's such a kind of a superpower, right? It's such a good practice to be part of.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I'm I'm a funny person in a lot of ways. Like I feel like I have a very anxious personality and I would call myself an introvert. But as I've kind of done a lot of self-improvement work and tried to figure out what it is that makes me anxious, I actually feel more anxious when I'm not with people. So I think there's an element to my introvert personality or my social anxiety where I actually really benefit from being around people. And like you say, that the trail running community and the community that we've got in the peaks especially is really special. There's some lovely, lovely people about. I've never gone to a race where I've felt like judged or out of place in trail running. And I see a lot of people out in the peaks training, and I've got a lot of friends who live locally who run, and I feel like I fit in there, and that doesn't feel like a particularly tough place for me to be. But yeah, the solitude of it all, I think, is something that I crave, and I really do enjoy that. So as much as I enjoy being part of a community of trail runners, I do like going out and running by myself. And, you know, yesterday, for instance, went out on a 25k run in the peaks, and I was by myself and the weather was awful. And it wasn't a particularly enjoyable run. It was like, you know, I'm training for something, I need to get out and do something long. I enjoyed being out, but the solitude of that was tough. It was really, really tough. But I didn't particularly want other people to be there with me either. I didn't feel like I would have benefited from that. So I think I get a lot out of being by myself. But I think also what happens when you spend that time by yourself, you do understand yourself a little bit better. It's easy when you're running to, I think, to notice how changeable your thoughts are. And especially if you're running a long way, I think people experience this, but I don't think you necessarily have to run a long way for that to happen. 1 minute you're feeling great, 1 minute you're feeling shit. You know, your thoughts are going up and down. You're backing yourself when you first start off, and then it starts to get a bit hard and you think, oh God, I can't do it anymore. And then you might come through that and be like, well, I've done it now, so I can do anything. And you finish your run feeling great, or finish your run not feeling so great and feeling a bit knackered. But all of those things are you doing something. And I think if we think about our mental health, there's a tendency to, because if you're struggling with your mental health, it's an unpleasant place to be. You want to get out of that place. You want to feel better. And what is often recommended for mental health is that you need all these external things coming in. So you might need talking therapy, or you might need medication, or this, that, and the other, you know, mindfulness, or adding loads of things in. But what reflects when you do something like physical activity or running is everything that you need to manage yourself is within you, and you're able to overcome that. So in the same way that if you're going out to run a trail race or an ultra, it doesn't matter how much you know about running and trail running. Your body has to be in a position where you can do that. You've got to move your legs, you've got to breathe through that, and you've got to cover that distance. Same thing with mental health. Like, there's an element to that where you can only kind of succeed in managing your mental health and your well-being if you're willing to do that work. And I think that is a huge parallel. And I think it's really key when I've supported people in the past with their mental health. Yes, all these external things can make a difference, and they can make a huge difference, and they're really important. But it's about you. It's about you being able to do that work. And if you have those experiences of, oh, I've been out running and I've managed to get myself through this run and it's been positive, you can translate that to like, oh, well, I can get myself out of this. I can overcome this challenge, and I can overcome this hurdle. And yeah, I think that's kind of where that comes in.
There's definitely like it gives you a kind of a, again, like language wise, I don't know, but like a kind of a mindset toolbox, like regardless of the running, like like not talking about the running, but like there's definitely tools I have now, like inside me, that I didn't have when I wasn't trail running. And that may be a coincidence, but I can't see that it is. Do you know, I don't know if I would have developed those in the status quo. I think doing super difficult thing. I remember when, for example, the first time I went to Chamonix, and ran around, like I was kind of newish to try. I'd done a couple of ultras, but I was not like, and I had the aim of trying to qualify for UTMB at that point before I tried to run 100 miles and went, what was that? I'm not trying to do that again. Which I didn't do. I got to 64 and was like, I can't. Like, this
That's
is
enough.
brilliant.
I think that's enough.
It's a long time. But I remember, and it's different, right? Like running up the side of a mountain is different. Like the first 5K took me an hour and a half. I was like, what is this? What is this thing that I'm trying to do? But I remember on that run on the side of Mont Blanc, like having to sit down a few times and have a word with myself, because we're so lucky in Derbyshire and the peaks with the nice kind of manicured trails. But like in Chamonix, like I was like, if I fall now, that's a cliff. Like that's the side of a mountain. Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to fall into a puddle like I would here. Like I'm falling off a mountain technically. So I had to, like, it was the scariest thing I've done, and I was on my own going, what do I do now? And I had to have a couple of words with myself, like on some trails of going, right, shall we turn round and go back? And then it looked even scarier going down. I was like, I've got to keep going. Like you've just got to
Mm.
keep going, get round to the other side, because you're not going to die. It will be fine. There's helicopters, and it's pretty spectacular way if you do. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like
Great.
what a nice venue to end it all in the nicest possible way. But doing those, like learning to do that sort of thing has given me like a few little kind of mantras and stuff I have in my mind. Like if the runs are difficult, 'cause often have like difficult 5K runs. Like because I'm old and it takes me like 8K to warm up properly now. But I've had some terrible 20-minute runs, like really horrible. I don't know what's happened. But and then equally some really nice 4-hour runs, like that
Yeah.
have gone without thinking about it, weirdly. But like mantras are really good for me. My mind works in kind of mantras to deal with stuff. And my favorite go-to one is slow is smooth, smooth is good. Right. And I use that in my life. Like if things are a bit manic, work-wise, if I'm trying to kind of multitask, I'm like, just like slow is smooth, smooth is good. Like
I
chill it
love
out.
that.
And it kind of works through my mind. But my mind works in these, like if you focus on thinking about that, or the next few steps, or just eating something, or enjoying the scenery that you're in, or take a break at the top of the hill, and have a look around. These little, it may have felt like a shit show getting to the point to that point of the hill, but
Mm.
there's like reset buttons, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that as well. I do use mantras quite a lot, especially on the longer stuff. And now and again I'll have a few written in my phone or like on my hand or something, so that I don't even have to consciously think of them. They are just there. But I'm a massive advocate of positive self-talk, and I've I've developed that because I've recognized over time that I'm just so mean to myself all the time. Like my head, if someone could look inside my head, it'd just be full of like little nasty gremlins saying the most horrible things to me. Um, and so I think definitely have recognized that through being out and about and running. And sometimes I'll set off on a run, and in my head it'll just be like, you're not good enough to do that. You're not good enough to do that. And I think, why am I like that? Why is my head like that? So I've had to think of some like really, really strong, tangible, positive affirmations that I can use when I'm running that are super simple, but help me to turn that bit of my head around. And it gets easier the further I progress in a run. I think my head just becomes a much quieter place. But yeah, the gremlins are just there from the start, and I think that's a skill that you need to develop, and you maybe aren't aware of that unless you put yourself in an environment where everything else is quiet. Like on a run, everything else is quiet around me. If I'm at work or I'm at home or whatever, I don't notice it so much because there's loads of stuff going on and there's people and there's everything else. But coming back to that like element of solitude, there's nothing louder than your own thoughts, and so you need to make your head a nice place to be if you're gonna have a good experience there.
Yeah, I totally concur with that. Like, and just focusing on the simple stuff for me, like remembering to breathe. I know that sounds ridiculous, but
It's
like if
always good when you remember to breathe.
like remember to breathe properly, and like because I've done some external stuff. So I'm a breath. I've done some breathwork instructor course and meditation instructor course, because I've found that like say that piece, that kind of meditative angle of it. And I've done a few courses for Move More Derbyshire, where like urban trail runs, so get people in the city out into their local green spaces, and we've done a running meditation sort of thing, which has been quite nice. But like those little tools to get, like, I suffer from judgment and comparison to other people, like kill my mind, if I'm honest. Like I remember doing a little local road race, and it's got all the got like good on you running club people, like proper running club people, but with all the matching vests and stuff like that, and like super stuck on getting time and speed and pace, which is the opposite to me, if I'm perfectly
Yeah.
honest. But I remember doing a local 10 miler, which was quite nice. But like the amount of running club people that came up to me afterwards and go, "Oh, you could have, like, if you went a minute faster, you would have been here." I was like, "It's a minute. Like, it's took an hour and a half, dude. Like, I'm going to run home." Like, this is, do you know what? Like, and it just focused on such different sort of things to me. But like teaching us how to, like, what I'm trying to make a connection like between the things that we get from running to lessons that how these tools can be useful for other people, right? Because I know I've seen on your website you do workshops for people and stuff, right? And things like teaching myself how to, when I feel myself judging myself or comparing myself, like I've got tools of how to take that away, right? So if you were to like teach people about the benefits of kind of trail running or ultra running or the tools that it would give you, like in order to have a positive ripple effect outside of the running world, obviously, do you know what I mean, in your personal life, what would you say they were? And do you teach them? Is that what your workshops are about? Does it kind of parallel or?
So a lot of the workshops that I do tend to be mindfulness based.
Okay, cool.
I'm really big on mindfulness.
Yeah.
I love it for me and my own well-being. It's been amazing. And there was a time in my life where I was really consistent with my mindfulness practice, and I probably did 15-20 minutes every day for near enough a year, and I feel like I functioned at my optimal level at that point in time. It's another one of those things where when you drop off that regular practice, it's really, really tough to get back on. And the consistency is when you get the most benefit out of it. But I still find it really useful, even on like a casual basis. If I just do a quick meditation, or if I'm feeling particularly stressed, then I can engage in a little bit of mindfulness. And it helps me. So what I tend to do is try and teach people, or try and make people aware. I maybe wouldn't use the word teach, but make people aware of what mindfulness is about and how you can use it in loads of different elements of your life. But I think you can do that when you're running. And for a lot of people, that's a good place to start, because like I've just said, my mind is, my life is busy and there's a lot going on. And doing mindfulness before I go to work might just not be feasible, because there's too many things to think about. There's time pressures and all the rest of it. But what's my chunk of time for myself in my day? It's usually when I go for my run. And so can I use that as my opportunity to practice like being in the present and being a little bit more aware and being conscious of my breath and all those things. So that's really what I try and get people to think about in my workshops. And the workshops that I've done so far have all been internal, so I've not been like out for a run or anything like that, but we do a meditative guided run as part of the workshop, and people really love it. And I just get people really in that to like think about their senses and imagine they're on a run and what their senses are doing and where their mind's going, and think about their breathing and match all those things up. But I get really positive responses from it. And I think for a lot of people, running or any kind of activity can be therapeutic, because it is your time to yourself. It's your time to switch off, or it's how you manage your stress. But you can gain a lot more by actively thinking about your senses, your breathing, where your head's at, how you can kind of change your thought processes around a little bit. And it's almost like taking it to that next level. So yeah, that's one thing that I do in my workshops. I think in terms of like developing a toolkit, you are just going back to those things of like, let's have an example of when you've overcome a challenge in your life. Have you done that on a run? Can you relate that to other parts of your life? Are you feeling mentally strong? Are you resilient? Well, you were resilient when you ran for 20 miles, or you were resilient when you whatever it may be. Even with like a road race, like you're saying, you were resilient when you pushed through, a fast pace for 10k and you were over your threshold and it was in the red and feeling really crap. That's resilience as well. So it doesn't matter whether you're running slow and steady or whether you're running fast and all out. All those things are giving you something back. Like running is one of those sports where you are getting out of it more than you're putting in. And there's constant room for growth in your mind. And I'm really, really interested in that. And I think I haven't found the limit. I don't think anyone's found the limit of what your mind is capable of. And so much comes from your experiences in being active.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. There's definitely, it definitely opens up different parts of your mind running. Like just let's say movement for the thing I'm like coaching. I'm going to make this podcast like a trail running podcast. I know it's going to fall into that section in a second, but like movement and exercise, like in nature, is like opens up different perspectives or different areas or different, maybe it's a combination of senses, like you alluded to, because when you're running trails, like you, as well as being super present and it being calming and meditative, like you also, or at least I do, have to be focused because there's roots and rocks and holes and hills and things which, like, if you're not paying attention but also have that sense of freedom, you're going to do yourself a mischief, and nobody needs that in their life.
But that is mindfulness. That's exactly what you're saying. You're never more in the present than when you're focusing on where you're putting your feet. So that's exactly what it is. You're being very mindful in that moment, because and I think that's like a real common misconception, because people think of mindfulness as being like this super like calm state of emptiness where nothing bothers you and you're
like
sort
still
of
right
above it all. Yeah, but actually mindfulness is about being in the present and being aware, and you're never more aware than when you're trying not to fall over on a trail.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Very true. Though it reminds me of a lovely phrase. There's a young kind of YouTuber, Instagram girl who does ultras called Mia Oldroyd. I don't know if you've come across her on the gram or anything. But she did a few vlogs of herself like getting into ultra marathons and trying to run ultra marathon. But she did one. I'll send you the link actually afterwards. It's really good. But just be where your feet are was a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
just be where your feet are. This is the thing that, like, she had a meditative practice and did stuff, but it was like a real human, unpolished kind of running journal of her development and this thing. And she went, it's just about being where your feet are. Like, don't worry about the next hill or the one that's come before or what you've got to do when you get back. Like, you've just got to be where your feet are. And I was like, I love that phrase. That's a great phrase. Do you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually used that on one of my Instagram posts. If you scroll way back, be where your feet are.
Maybe she got it off you. There you go.
Well, no, I'm sure she didn't. But yeah, I love that phrase as well. Yeah, that is great, and it's so right. Like, you really have no option but to be where your feet are when you're trail running, because it does demand so much of your focus and your attention, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Like just before we round off, actually, I want to, because you're part of an ASICS team. I want to talk like discuss that. Like I don't know what the real name is, but you're part of like something to do with ASICS, aren't you? What's that? Tell us
Yeah,
about that.
ASICS front runner. So I'm on the ASICS front runner team for UK and Ireland. It's basically I'm an ambassador for the brand. So what they aim to do is kind of bring together a community of runners that are really relatable. For, you know, you don't have to be fast. There's no pace requirements. There's no distance requirements. You don't have to be anything. You just need to run and enjoy running. So, yeah, I joined them. This is my 3rd year with them now, I think. Yeah, joined them 2 years ago. And that's been a really great experience as well. I don't know if you know much about ASICS as a brand. They have a real strong ethos in mental well-being.
Nice.
So ASICS is actually an acronym. I won't try and pronounce it in Latin because I don't know it, but it translates to sound mind in a sound body. So they do a lot of stuff around feeling good and focusing on your well-being. And every year they recruit a team of people to be ambassadors for the brand as part of the front runner program. And they took me on a couple of years ago. And yeah, that's been great. It's been so positive. Like it's another real lovely community to be a part of. There's such a diverse mix in the front runner community. So even in our UK and Ireland team, we've got, you know, trail runners, we've got road runners, there's an Olympian, there's people who just run for fun. We've got real strong advocates for Black trail runners and Muslim runners, and it's lovely. It's such a nice mix of people. But then we also get to do some really cool things through ASICS. And one of the things that I do through ASICS is some of the workshops that I've done. So when I talk about the mindfulness stuff, they were really keen on that when I joined the team because of the sound mind, sound body ethos. And so I actually did we do like community meetups twice a year, I think. And I actually hosted a workshop for my front runner teammates. And honestly, it was the first time that we've ever been in a room together and been quiet and been relaxed. It was lovely and calm. Usually those meetings are quite hectic and all focused on like getting content and running together and things. But we actually took some time in a room to lay down and meditate, and I guided people through some mindfulness. And
Nice.
Yeah, that whole experience has been really, really lovely.
There's some, we won't open this kind of word, but that sounds like a real good. There's some real nice examples like that ASICS one of brands using trail runners like to do good. Like I know we did some introduction to trail running work with Raw, the sponsors of this podcast, at Decathlon, because they want to make sport, their ethos is making sport accessible, and they're really got and things like that, and they've all got a community space and workshop space in their stores for people to do that sort of thing, and they're lovely brand. And I know like there's a lot going on in the brand and business of trail running and running that connects mental health and does good stuff. So that's a lovely example. Yeah, really nice, really nice. But well, thanks for coming on, Celina. I think that's probably a good time to put a dot in it. It's been really interesting catching up and learning a bit more about kind of mental health, and a bit of a therapy session for me. Sorry about that, turned into there in the middle, but that was useful, very cathartic.
That's all right. Anytime. That's what I'm good at. Okay, may as well use my skills.
Very cathartic. But yeah, I'll pop all the details to and Celina's website and blog. She writes really nice content. There's a great piece about visioning that I was going to talk about, but again, we'll open that another time. On there that she got really good, and Instagram link so you can stay in touch and find out about Celina. But again, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Right, let's stop.